Let me introduce you to another one of John McDonnell's stories at Flow News 24. This time it involves the Murray Basin Rail project and its injection of new funds, which is great news in the context of the project getting more of it completed, and in no small part the advocacy for the member for Mallee, who is Anne Webster. And John McDonnell's put this article together for us in looking at this federal government cash injection and in dollar terms, what does that mean? And how important is it for this project and moving it forward? And there was languaging the Victorian government's inaction and using funds previously allocated to the project on other level crossings in its capital city probably didn't help the completion issues for the Murray Basin Rail project back for 2014. 5 years later, the cost doubled and blown out, writes John, and the project needed to have its key components redone. The Victorian government lost its enthusiasm for that remote part of the state. After pressure from Victorian farmers and local Nationals member Dr. Anne Webster, the federal member for Mallee, the Commonwealth has stepped up to the plate. It's going to provide the funding to finish the project. As originally envisaged, the project had two main elements: the expansion of the Victorian standard gauge network and the improvement of line capacity via increased axle loads, but both of which would and intended to facilitate more efficient intrastate rail connections. The rationale for the project centred on improved access to the Victorian ports of Portland, Geelong and Melbourne, and encouraging freight users to retain access to the Victorian network rather than road transport for moving grain particularly. The plan was for the Mildura, Sea Lake, Manangatang and Murrayville lines to be fully gauge converted between Maryborough and their respective termini. In addition, the defunct standard gauge link between Ararat and Maryborough was to be repaired and reopened to traffic. The entire length of the Geelong-Ballarat and the Mildura line between Maryborough and Ballarat were to be converted to dual gauge to facilitate standard gauge access to the port of Geelong. In addition to standardisation, maximum axle loads on all lines were to be increased to at least 21 tonne. That's 21 long tonnes, at which the exception of the Murrayville line, which was being upgraded to 19 long tonnes in axle load. According to the project documentation, this would result in an increase in payload per train of some 300 to 400 tonnes or 300 to 390 long tonnes. V-Line's management of the project fell short of the mark, and when the budgeted $440 million was nearly spent, the project was only half complete, and the Ararat to Maryborough section had to be done because, the contractors had simply relayed the old rails. Moreover, there had been objections to the project that were not taken into account. That is, the Central Goldfields Council objected to the dual gauge line because it would slow the time of passenger commutes, and a group of rail experts, engineers and economists challenged the utility of the Maryborough-Ararat link. When the project stopped in 2019 after the $440 million had run out, the Victorian Infrastructure Minister Jacinta Allen commissioned a new report and the plan which jettisoned the standardisation between Mildura and Maryborough, with the minister saying the original business case was significantly deficient in a number of ways. That original scope massively underestimated the cost. I'm going to be very open and direct with some of the challenges we're facing. I'm not going to go back and repeat those problems of the past. So the new plan, it was approved and the federal government agreed to provide an additional $195.5 million to the Victorian government. There's a lot in it. There's a lot of money needed. The Victorian government severely underestimated the cost, got itself in a pickle, has asked the federal government to help, and Morrison has. Will Daniel Andrews now get the job completed with the federal money? Or will it somehow not get completed again and we'll find money allocated elsewhere and go back with cap in hand to the same federal government, maybe before the next election? Interesting, isn't it, how these things seem to get costed wrongly to start with? Whose fault was that?